Good morning everyone. Okay, for today's lesson, we will be discussing the understanding compare and contrast. And because we are going to discuss it, let's discuss first the compare and contrast text. Compare and contrast text, it is a structure or a pattern of text organization where both similarities and differences of two or more things are explored. So when they say compare and contrast, this is where similarities and differences of two different things, okay, of two or more things are being analyzed, okay, or examined. So it is important to remember that with the compare and contrast text structure, the text should be discussing just the similarities and the differences. Okay? So if the text only discusses similarities, it is just comparing. And if the text discusses the ways that the things are different, it is only contrasting. So the text must do both, okay, for them to be considered as compare and contrast text structure. Okay po? So for example, Datu Usman and Pilandok are both determined. Datu Usman is firm about his plan to continue cutting trees in the forest. Pilandok is also determined to protect the forest. However, they differ in terms of concern for the environment. Datu Usman ordered his men to cut trees from the forest. Unlike Datu Usman, Pilandok forbids the cutting of trees. So here in this text structure, I discussed the similarities of Datu Usman and Pilandok, that they are both determined. Datu Usman is firm and Pilandok is also determined. And the differences of the two is that their terms of concern in the environment. Well, Datu Usman wanted to cut the trees, while while Pilandok forbids of cutting trees. Okay, so this is an example of compare and contrast text, where I stated here the similarities of the two and the differences of both of them. Okay, so I have here a Venn diagram for you to understand it further and for you to visualize it. Okay, so Datu Usman and Pilandok, they are both determined. Okay, Datu Usman is firm and Pilandok is also determined. And the differences between the two is that Datu Usman ordered his men to cut trees from the forest. Okay, while Pilandok, he forbids cutting trees of in the forest. So therefore, it, it it is stated there the differences of the two. Okay, they have difference in considering or caring the environment. Okay, so let's proceed. A compare and contrast text can be presented in two ways. So the first one is subject by subject and the second one is point by point. So when you say subject by subject, this is where the writer discusses one subject. Okay? You can start with one subject and starts to point by point in complete details before moving on to the next subject. So here, you are going to think first, okay, the characteristic of the first subject before going on to the next subject. Okay? Next, point by point, the writer here discusses one point at a time and how it applies to each subject before moving on to the next point. Okay? So these are the following words that you can use to compare and contrast in the text structure. Okay? These words can guide you for you to show a compare and contrast in your text structure. Okay, so compare, you can use like, both, similar, alike, same as, similar to, compared with, as well as. And for contrast, you can also use unlike, neither, different, although, instead of, however, but not, different from. Okay, so in writing a compare and contrast text, here, you can write a compare and contrast text essay to highlight the similarities and differences between the two subjects. Okay, so this kind of essay explains an unfamiliar topic or concept, provides a new way or insight of looking at things, or presents that one subject is superior to one another. Okay, so there are steps in writing a compare and contrast essay. First, you have to choose your subject. Okay, so in choosing your subjects for the essay, make sure to have two subjects. Okay, two subjects that are under the same category and are still different from each other. For example, if you want to write an environmental problem, you may write about the types of pollution. Okay? So that is an example. You have to choose two subjects that are under the same category but are different with one another. Okay? For you to make a compare and contrast for them, for the both of them. Okay? Next, the second step is spot the similarities and differences between the subjects. Okay? So you have to start with identifying which aspects of the subjects are the same or different. Okay? You have to make two lists. One for the similarities and one for the differences. Okay? So you have to list the differences and similarities for each point of comparison. You can also use a Venn diagram just like what I used a while ago for me to show you how it is being written, okay? So for you to understand it clearly, okay? So you can also use again a Venn diagram to represent the things that are the same and different within the subjects. So among the points, and the third steps is decide on the main point of difference to highlight. You have to decide the main point to highlight in your essay. Okay? So among the points of comparison you have listed, I told you to list the similarities and differences, right? So here you have to choose the main point. Okay? So identify which is most significant and make sure that this information is highlighted in your essay. Okay? So because this is the main point, therefore it must be highlighted to your essay. Okay? To be to see it clearly. Okay? For us to see it abruptly. Okay? Next steps is explain each similarities or differences. Okay? You have to explain each similarity or difference. So, after writing about the main point, you have to write now about every similarity and differences. Every single similarity and differences. Okay? Next, you have to decide on the organizational structure. Okay, so there are many ways to structure your compare and contrast essay. First, you can write about the subject in detail and then switch to the other subject. And second is you have to discuss the point or each point of comparison and what made the subject similar and different. Okay, that those are the two ways to compare or to make a structure of a compare and contrast essay. And after that, you have to proofread and revise your essay carefully. Okay? You have to check your work for errors, either grammar, spelling, capitalization, and punctuation. Okay? You also have to organize your ideas and use words or expressions for compare and contrast. Okay, so these are words that you can use for compare and contrast. So some words used to compare and contrast are equally, likewise, both, as well as, and similar to. Now these are the words that you can use to contrast: but, unlike, although, however, on the contrary, and on the other hand. Okay, so those words you can use to compare and contrast on your essay. Okay, for you to show a compare and contrast on your essay. Okay, so thank you for listening and see you next week.